thanks a lot for coming out on this day. This is a nice, rainy, kind of, hopefully not pre-hurricane rain, but it is here. And I guess it'll be here for a little while, but thank you for coming out on this wonderful Sunday. The exhibition is in full swing, and hopefully you guys had a chance to kind of peruse and talk to some of the artists that are here. And this is called the 400, 1619 to 2019. And I want to introduce Alana here, who is the,
Hi everyone.
yeah, she is kind of the inventor of this and had this idea, and I'll let her speak a little bit about that in a few minutes. And came just like, let's put this show together. So why don't you just take a moment to say how this involved yourself and then the history of it.
So basically, I guess in the beginning of the year, my mother actually went on a trip to Africa with a delegation, and they went to Angola. So where, as many of you know, the first enslaved Africans to arrive in Virginia, Point Comfort, Virginia, came from Angola. So there was a prophecy that in the year 2019, a group of African Americans would come to the land, and they came, and so much happened from that trip. And I was so inspired by hearing from her and my mentor that went on the trip that I thought that we need to do an art show and bring together all different artists from the diaspora to visually document the journey since these 400 years have passed, and to commemorate visually the experiences that we've gone through, the struggles, to highlight our power and our evolution. So it was definitely a journey to pull this together. It was very challenging, very short amount of time to do it. It was nothing short of a miracle, I'd say. I did approach Tim Davis, who is with International Visions Gallery. He's an esteemed curator, many of you know, with the idea, and to see if he would be open to collaborating. So we teamed up on it, and from there just started taking on a life of its own. And so many of the artists that are here today, we're just so thankful to have you, because it wouldn't be this without you. And so I want to say thank you.
Absolutely. So. Yes. Here's another artist coming in, Preston Simpson. Right. Grab a chair. Come on up, Preston. Please. I'm just going to go ahead and start. As many of you know, this year is the commemoration of the 400 years, 1619 to 2019, and it's a story about our people, black individuals being taken from Angola, as Alana said, in 1619. And it's happened in August, where they landed in County, Virginia, not Jamestown. That's been changed, I guess, from the history part of it. But at one particular point, in 1619, as I was reading, a private vessel from Angola, the White Lion, landed in Virginia at Point Comfort, which is present-day Hampton University. And this was only 20, there were more. Another vessel was there, more Africans came after that, and what I understand from the research, there were also 2 or 3 vessels from different parts that were collecting Africans and bringing them here or bringing them to other ports. And there was, I think, a off by rum, from what I understand. So that energy, that negative thought of just bringing someone here, and of course a lot of folks died in between, was the beginning of ourselves, Africans from the African diaspora, becoming enslaved in the United States. Also, as I read, there were, once here, no one knew what to do with them, and they basically, as a people, they were just put in indentured service, and this, even the governor bought some of the slaves, or the Africans, and made them slaves, and all that's kind of the beginning of what happened 1619. So it's an important year. It's an important year to actually talk a little bit about that. And so the questions that I want to ask will be based on this in terms of how we will kind of work with the discussion, since there's so many artists that have brought their own journey to the walls of Prince George's County Museum and Cultural Center. We want to just kind of go ahead and work with that. And I do want to say before I get started that I want to thank them for actually hosting this particular event. Monica Montgomery, who's the executive director, is not here today, but she has been working hard, and Tristan Sanders and on staff to actually put this all together in a timely fashion. So we do appreciate them and how they have been working with us in terms of the show and so forth. But let's introduce the artist, and then we'll just go from there. Roy Lewis is on my left. He's taking pictures as we, on the staff. His photos are in the front there. Roy Lewis has been around the Washington area for a long time. Anton Jones, who has come to us, the longest individual from Germany. He arrived here on Thursday, and he is, he was based in New York when he sent these images to us, and you can talk more about those as you move forward. He sent those images to us and said we got to have those, and went back to Germany, and now back to Germany, Munich, right? Berlin, I'm sorry. And then came just yesterday to be with us today, so we appreciate you being here along the way. Calvin Coleman is to my left here. His piece is over on the side, and thank you for showing. There's a Washington-based artist.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, and we have Carol Bean, who is a poet, a writer herself, and the wife of Michael Platt, whose piece is right behind us. And we have Ann Bowie, Ann, who is to her right. She's a Washington artist and been based here for many, many years and doing some incredible things. Wesley Clark, next, whose piece is right here, who is currently having a show at Matisse, and in Baltimore, and working hard, and also Washington, Baltimore, doing things. Terrence Nicholson, his piece is a white piece that's on the right. Just told me he's at the Herschel, and it's just put a tape on and had to rush over here and had to go back and stop it, right? So this man is very busy. Thank you for coming. I know he had a busy schedule. And Jay Coleman, next to the muralist, next to Alana. And Jay is all around also. You can see his murals in different places. And then we have Preston Sampson. Thanks for coming, Preston.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And this piece is right behind. He'll talk more about the 5. Yes, so thank you guys for being here. So the first question I want to ask, and I want to ask, I want Roy to kind of start off, if you don't mind. Why do you think it's important to remember this 400th year? And this, what does it mean right now to Black individuals this year as we commemorate this this year? And from that particular point, where do we move from here?
Well, I think it's important because, we tend to think of this year as being, it's 400, it's a number. But, we've been living the experience of being here since we got off the ship, like we just talked about. And even when on the way over, a lot of our people jumped off.
Right.
So that means, even though they didn't even know what they were going to, they knew something was coming up that they didn't like, so they jumped off. So, one of my folk, I've always been a student of history. I love history. So once I matched history up with having an art to deal with it, to be able to record it, then I was okay. It didn't just happen. So as I began to blend those two things, history and photography, that kind of set me on the right path in terms of knowing that there were things happening. Those pictures that I have out there with 60s, middle 60s, 63 and 66. And so I was in Chicago at the time, and there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
And so I just felt this need that this particular 60s, middle 60s piece was not going to continue the way it was continuing. And so I felt the need to document it, to record it, just for today so we can look at it and study it and see it. But it's never, as Larry said, it was not just the 60s, but stuff started long before the 60s.
Right.
Those people jumping off the boat was the protest.
Absolutely.
And so we just somehow or another don't connect being forced onto the boat, in some cases by some of our own people, and being on the boat, and getting here and being in this horrible situation, inhumane treatment. But we are still sitting here. We're here right now, 400 years later. And I think that the celebrations that's been going on down in Virginia, Hampton, and those places, where people are very emotional, because that undercurrent is always there.
Yeah.
It's always there. You don't want to, somehow or another, we've been taught or trained in the school system to not to appreciate it, not to appreciate that it's a part of our pain that we live every day. So I think that this work in here reflects, if you look at every piece in here, it has something to do with part of that struggle, and part of that pain, and part of the beauty, and part of the fact that we're still here, we're sitting right here in everybody's face. We're not going anywhere. And the whole impetus has always been for everybody. Dr. King wasn't fighting for us.
Right.
He really was fighting for everybody. I mean, I've been in a couple of situations with him, and I know this man was fighting. And a lot of other people. He didn't fight by himself.
Yeah, hold that thought too.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Terrence, how about you? What's your feeling on this?
Yesterday, yesterday I was having a conversation with my mother, and we were talking about why young people don't seem to value human life, and I thought about it, and it's interesting you should ask that question now, because I was thinking of it in context of what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. An event happened. There were people who were directly impacted by it, and then they had offspring, and then genetically, like the fallout from that carried on for generations. And when I think about this show, and I think about what happened with 400 years ago, and then Jim Crow and crack, and you go on and these bombs, these like little, and how generationally, like we've been affected. Lately I've been dealing with stuff from Dr. Joy DeGroot, the post-traumatic slave syndrome,
Yeah.
and how she deals with how the stuff that I carry, she like connects the dots, how she connects it 400 years back, and I've been sort of, I guess, still in the process of digesting all this, because it's a lot. The piece that you guys picked for the show is kind of, for me, what that was about was coming to terms for myself. I guess one was success means what, like not using the outside, not using outside means to measure my insides, if that makes any sense. So in other words, the piece is about, had a difficult time. It was about the housing bubble that burst, subprime loans and all that, and the fix that, not only myself but other people can find themselves in. And in the process of coming through that, and what that looks like as far as things like, well, I'm a father, I'm supposed to be a hunter-gatherer, and a hunter-gatherer shouldn't have to call the mortgage people and tell them they can't pay them, but in that setting, I had to do that, and so at that point, the head of the house looked like that at the time, and then we come through all that, and then with all this paperwork left over, so what do I do with that now that I've come out of an experience? How do I heal from it, right? And so, so all the bills and all the threatening notices and all that stuff, I made a coleslaw out of them and put them on a thing, right? Okay, so, but it also, it gave me a more empathy. It gave me a deeper empathy for people who have adversity, and I don't know. I think that we are, as black folk, we are living the best we can in a foreign land, really. Even if you're a few dollars above the rent, this is still kind of a foreign land, I think. So.
Ann, any
Yeah.
comments?
Sure, like always, but I want to thank you, I was trash talking that one. I was thank you and Alana and the museum as well for your graciousness and for your regard in collecting and working with us individually and to create something that comes from so many different places and yet congeals into a very beautiful whole. And the 40 years to me is based on the notion of, I'm real clear on what we've been through. And I'm of the belief that there are things that we experience that will never see the light of day. They will never be told because they're just too horrendous for anybody to share. I've done reading the things out of the concentration camps in Germany and the women who were taken as slaves by ISIS, and we don't know, the half has not been told. And I firmly agree with that. What I'm really interested in, so I know what we've been through, I want to know how we got through. It's been the focus of my work.
Okay.
And as a person with Southern roots, part of my whole thing is the way that African American men are often portrayed and the way the Southern enslaved experience is often portrayed. That's not my father, that's not my Uncle Willie, those are not the Southern black men that I know and regard. Those are not them. And so it always kind of raised my hackles, the depiction of people, because it's like, no. And how we got through, for me, is about understanding that we have bought into the dominant narrative about enslavement, that we bought it hook, line, and sinker, and that we believe it, and we've acted upon it. And the dominant narrative is that we were psychologically destroyed during the Middle Passage. All the life was beat out of us. We had no religion and no concept of God, and that as a result of all that, we rolled over and became Sambo and the like. That's the dominant narrative, and unfortunately, we have bought into it as much as the rest of America. And that narrative is a lie on all 3 points in my research and my study. And so my work addresses the however, because I come from people who have dealt with some of what the South can dish out firsthand. And I know that they stood straight and they were crazy as all get out, but so is everybody else. So my work deals with the fact that we do not understand, for example, that there were over 400 rebellions on the Atlantic during the Middle Passage. Over 400. And those are the ones that were just reported. It does not deal with the fact that once they landed here, Dr. Harry and Cujo and Cuffy, etc., Dr. Harry made the powder for the fires for one of the first insurrections in 1741 in this country. It doesn't deal with the fact that the largest rebellion in this country was in New Orleans in 1811, and the gentleman who just finished off the 1619 report for the New York Times dismisses that in 2 sentences. And so it really, it says, oh no, we cannot regard and we don't believe we don't know who they were and how they dealt with it and how they got through it. And I'm really passionate about that, and I really have to. Ralph Ellison sort of sums it up. He says, I am not ashamed that my ancestors were slaves. I am ashamed that I once was ashamed. And for me, that kind of sums it up, because it's like if we knew the half of it, we would understand that no. Yes, everybody's been knocked down, but the fact that the so-called the strengths and the energy and the spirituality and the power that got us through have been trumped by everybody saying we bought that stuff. And the people that were under there didn't buy it. And the other thing for me is I ran into this guy who's Igbo, and he's very tall, handsome, stalwart guy. And we were talking, he says, yeah, my people we were never enslaved. We never gave in. We walked into the water. And I said, you know, that's well and good, but nobody would be here if everybody had jumped off the boat. And Julie Dash says in her poem, in her film, The Daughters of the Dust, when those women are stirring those indigo pots, that they chose to survive. Yeah. Somebody had to choose to suck it up and keep going. And somebody had to believe, and somebody pulled from something, someplace, to get up one more day and to deal with it, and to be in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and say, if I'm going to go out, I would choose how I go out. And if I die, at least I die on my terms. And that, to me, is what the 400 years are about. To say, look, let's revisit this and let's deal with what got us through.
And continue to get us through.
And I will shut up.
No, and continue to get us through.
And
Thank you.
continue.
Get us through. No, you have to.
And
Very good, very good.
continue to get us through, and let's
Absolutely.
identify that and work with that and honor it. And I don't care if somebody's running around trees and singing poems at night under the full moon. If that's what enabled them to get through the Middle Passage and get off that boat and still be walking, and then get up on a block and get examined and then get sold, and then find somebody to love and have children and create a life, I want to know what that is. And I don't care if it is them running around bushes.
Gotcha.
I might need to run around some bushes with them. So,
Survival.
no, it's more than survival, it's prevailing. Prevailing. So.
Anyone else want to comment on that question?
Yeah, I'll take a shot.
Please, Preston.
Okay. Listening to Roy and Ann about what they say, first of all, being Southern, you know, I'm as far south as you can get, you know, South Florida in the 60s.
Absolutely,
Which-
fine representative of an African American man.
So I feel like, you know, my journey in this country, you know, one of the things that's always been my call to arms is the strength and perseverance of black man. With no, I mean, of course, we came through a matriarchal system, and but the men have been denigrated, marginalized, enslaved, beat, humiliated in front of their one. Listen to what my man was talking about, financial humiliation. You know, there's so many levels of things that we go through as men in this country. But, you know, I would like to think that in the total, when you see my work and people really examine and look at my work as a whole over my career, it's been about strength, dignity, and perseverance of us. You know, it's a continuum. I think, you know, the 400, when you talk about that, I think, you know, one of the things I always think of is continuum, same as it ever was. No matter what they've done to us, you know, from, as you said, from the Middle Passage to Jim Crow to brother getting shot in his own crib, you know, by the police in Dallas. It's the same thing. It's always the same thing. We are targeted. We are, I say, try to be marginalized. But I grew up with strong black men in my presence, you know, and they were ordinary men. And the work I tried to do in my career has always been to make, you know, highlight that and make notice. And no matter what you do, we're still there. So resolute and continuum are two words that I think. And when you talk about the 400 years, it's the same as it ever was, but we're still here. You know, we're still here. Every, you know, black man in this room has gone through, we know what it's like, you know, every single day of your life. And the painting I did of the brother from, you know, one of the Central Park Five, I think it illustrates, especially with this person who's in the White House now, they want this guy put to death. You know, the whole crew without not even considering that they were innocent. And it wasn't true, but it was just because. You know, I talked to a police officer friend of mine the other day, and he told me, and this is a brother too, he told me, well, black men need to learn how to comply with the law. Wow. And I'm like, wow. I said, you know, but the fact that they're so scared that they won't shoot first in 1 second, let me see your power. I mean, that's fear. That's Chuck D. Fear of a black man. They're scared of us. They're scared of you. They're scared of all of us. They're scared of my 14-year-old son, you know, who's skinny, little knotty-head boy. You know, they're scared of him.
Yeah.
You know, so their response to that is to take our lives. So all of that to say is, my response is 400 years, no matter what has happened, we're still here, still standing, and standing strong. I mean, and again, I'll take what you said about, thank you so much for this show. This is wonderful, and I do believe that when you look at everybody's approach to how they reconcile what the issues that they have with their work, it's all here is different. It's beautiful. I'm proud to be a part of it, and thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, as we continue to move forward, like Preston Sampson's work is behind him right there. It's about the Central Park 5. And one other question I wanted to ask is maybe for Wes and also Calvin, because you had mentioned about the target. It's always been a target ever since we've been in this country. We landed on the ground, and it seems like there they are, and it's kind of continual, the racist acts that continue. So Wes, pieces here that has to deal with the targeted, as well as Calvin's who's on the corner. Maybe you can speak a little bit about your journey and the work that you have been creating, and the platform and the necessity of why you do the work.
So, with this piece, Mistaken Identity, it's really focusing on that idea of wrongfully taking my identity, and just what that means on a large scale. But on two fronts. It was one of my biggest fears growing up was being mistaken for someone else. So you did A, B, and C, and being gunned down for that. And I didn't even grow up in in a hood or anything of that nature. But that fear was still there and present. And so much of what I've been doing, so I mean, there's a whole series around this whole being targeted and feeling like a target, and everything. And so from there, though, I began to focus on flipping that and getting past that feeling of being a target and thinking about a moment of strength and what have you. And so similarly to what Ann was saying, you have then the piece that's in the case, Our Beautiful Black Unicorn. And each of those has that one in particular has Denmark Vesey engraved on it. And there was a series of 4, and so each of them was for a slave revolt uprising, a leader of a slave revolt uprising. And so just thinking about, again, that power of who we are in a situation where we are supposed to be so, broken, as you said, that narrative that we are, sold of being broken and beat down. You have these people and us who gathered, who, while one name is mentioned, it takes more than one name to start a revolt, and so that one name is in recognition of everyone that was a part of that. And just thinking about that spirit coming out of this situation that is supposed to be, that was very overly oppressive, but yet instill our strength of spirit to go against it and to continue to fight. And so I think that's one of the things that wanting to take that idea and that spirit and bring it forward, similar to what you're saying as far as, this being a foreign land, our blood is on this land. Like, we built this land. So whose land is it? We built the country that government, everything that's built around, is on our backs. And so it's thinking about, again, just that spirit of who we are, and hence, so people always ask, well, why the unicorn? And in a sense, it goes back to similarly that a false narrative. Kind of like it then morphs into this you know, Little Pony type bubbly horn thing, right? And so similarly thinking about how our image has been taken and misconstrued and manipulated and fed to, you know, to us in this whole other range, when the reality is, no, like we are this beautiful creature of a spirit who you can't hold down, who still is here, still persevering. And so it's funny, so it's interesting that you chose, you know, the two pieces from you. I was thinking about that, is that you have where I was starting at, in a piece that particularly deals with my childhood and how I, at least, you know, starting, the base of it started there, and to a piece where now, you know, how I'm thinking about in my direction as a man. So,
Thank you.
The piece is significantly a target
Yes.
and looks like bars.
Absolutely. Well, the main symbol in this painting that I created called targeted is the target. And that's something that I believe we have been targeted for years. And what you see is our youth being behind bars and the bars being the American flag. The establishment or the government is more or less holding us back. But one of the things that really sticks out to me in this painting would be the hands of the boy that's holding onto the bars. You know, those are some strong hands. And yet he's enslaved or behind bars. He's very strong yet still. Now, I was born in Hampton, Virginia, by the way.
Okay.
And I didn't know that history, so thank you. But I live in Baltimore. Every day that I travel to D.C. to teach, I'm hearing of shootings and killings. And the target also represents us killing ourselves. And I think that has a lot to do with the switch in the mentality or the decrease in our mentality to want to take the lives of our own. So that target has a couple of meanings. But that is the reason why the painting was creative. It was to depict what is going on in society today. You know, our young people, even our old people, older people, are being targeted.
Always have been.
Yeah,
Like many of the others. Like it seems like it's been going on.
yeah, and it's a cycle.
It's a cycle. Amanda, did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
I was thinking about the role of women in this 400-year period, and I wanted to specifically ask Shiva, Maya, and Jay Coleman about your viewpoints surrounding the evolution of the woman, and as an artist too, how you researched and pulled into the feminine power and what that looks like being a woman, a female artist, and I just want you to expand on that.
Okay, thank you. Well, with my artwork in general, I'm generally depicting women of color, or black women specifically, in a spiritual light, okay? And I tend to, although I really understand the importance of the telling of our history and our presence in America, I think that that black women especially have been kind of removed from the idea that we have divinity running through us and that we are a part of a divine, community. And so, and what does that godliness look like? So I try to define those things in my paintings. And, I, over time, in my lifetime and just in my research, when I see how black women have been depicted in media over time, it's just nothing I relate to. It's nothing I recognize in my life, in my family, and it's all a caricature of presumed stereotypes. And I got tired of seeing that. And I wanted to make artwork that was a reflection of my mother and myself and my femininity and my experience, and with the natural community around me, with the universe, with all these things that have nothing to do with like racism or just like slavery or chains, and none of those things. This is like even deeper than that. Like, what is in our spirit? What is in our hearts? And how do we, you know, and I want to identify those things and bring them out, and so that you can see them and feel them and touch them and feel like you're part of that world too, and understand like, oh yeah, this is goddess, this is a queen. Like, and so when young girls or women, even if it's a self-portrait, if I depict myself in certain ways, and someone comes to me and says, oh, that's Tisha, oh, that's my aunt, oh, that's you, that's me. You know, they see themselves, you know, in this work, and they're so excited. And then when they tell me, oh, this is as lift, you know, saying things that tell me that it's lifted their self-esteem, that they're happy about this, that they have something that they can show their daughters to aspire towards. That makes me feel good, and I know I've hit the mark, right? So that is my aim, is to show that we belong, that we have always been a part of this spiritual world. You know, we've always been a part of the divine order, you know? So that's what I attempt in my work, is to show that we are on all of this. It's not just this mundane kind of everyday experience. We are all up and through everything, just like God, just like we are part of all of this, you know? So that's where I'm coming from with my work.
And Jay of Pullman here. Right when you come into the front, his work is Mama IET. So it's a woman's face that she's gazing into the rest of the show. Can you expand upon the role of women in your art? Because I know you have a reverence for feminine and women, and talk about women as goddesses and how they carry the DNA of the whole earth.
So the nation is only as strong as the power of its women. And when I think about our fight, from antiquity to now, it's been in protection of her. We can talk about mitochondrial DNA and everyone on the planet being linked to a single black woman, the foundation. So that particular piece was a picture that you texted me. It was a black and white photo, and I was working on the Howard Theater Walk of Fame, which was driving me nuts. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how I was going to get out of it. I didn't know how I was going to get through it. So I stopped. I said, I'm going to stop for 2 hours. I'm going to paint this woman because she spoke to me in some kind of way. It was a black and white photo. I use a lot of arbitrary color to represent the entire diaspora. We come in all shapes, colors, everything. But they can all be traced back to her. And when I think about, and I don't mean to be graphic, but we have to be graphic because we run from the graphicness of our situation and of our history. Alexander to Trump, to Constantinople, to all the folks that, to Columbus, Cristobal Colon, all the people that rewrote our story, cut babies out of bellies like it was the norm. And we have to rewrite that norm. We have to normalize resistance. And I ain't talking about putting your hands up. To me, that's submission. I only sees them doing what they do, and it's not a game. It's like, I have to live and breathe this. It's a part of my core, and that ancestral core, the DNA that ran through those people, that runs through us, that we don't see. We can't put a picture to it. We can't put a name to it. But I think about my own great-grandfather. Like, he left North Carolina because he was invited to leave because he stood his ground. And I come from that. And I'm not gonna disappoint that. So when people think about artists, like, oh, you're a painter, you're just delicate.
Yeah.
I'm a bare knuckle painter. So I hope to be an educator, a spiritual advocate, a pugilist, a father, a warrior, a lover, a son.
I wanted to jump in on that because it's another myth that needs to be debunked in my mind's eye. Because Bell Hooks, in one of her pieces, said the one thing that America does not want to see are black men and black women honoring each other. It's one thing that America does not want to see, and has done a lot to make sure that that occurs. And that too flies in the face of some of the research that I've done and some of the things that I've observed about the fact that on those ships, the men were chained below, but women and children were often allowed to run the deck, and they did laundry and they did cooking and all of that for the crew as they were going on many of those vessels. And they were the ones who knew the lay of the land of the ship, and they were the ones who coded the men to tell them the lay of the land of the ship and to sneak them weapons and to tell them when, who was where in terms of having rebellions on those ships. And so even there, there was a cooperation and an honoring of those two. And I also remember a scene out of Roots when Kunta Kinte got his foot cut off and by those patty rollers, and he was in the bed and he was not ever going to get up, and he was obviously legitimately depressed. But what his wife did is, I can't remember the exact dynamics of it, but his wife was knitting him something to go on the stump, knitting him a cover to go on the stump, and she basically dared him to stay in that bed. She some kind of way finessed him and challenged his pride and his heart and his ego to get up off that bed. And that's what I deal with in terms of looking at African American men and African American women. Like, your grandfather was invited to lead because he stood his ground. And I think one of the most painful, powerful things you can do is witness somebody you loved going through something and you can't help them. The powerlessness and helplessness and the self-hatred that can come out of you watching somebody you love and you can do nothing about it. That has to be held hand in hand with the however that they did. Somehow or another, how do you look somebody in the eye after you've seen them get shredded and honor them in such a way that they are able to get back up and that they are able to know that you still have regard for them and that they have regard for you in spite of watching them experience something that should take away all your regard. And I believe that that part of the story of African American men and women through enslavement and understanding that black men have always done the baby thing and the diaper thing. And I look at a lot of men these days going around as if it's a thing to carry your child around, or it's a thing to watch. Black men have been doing that since day one. Changing diapers, fixing food, walking kids going far. And the thing is that I don't care if a black man's father is dead, in jail, drugged out, or buried. There is always some man in that boy's life. It doesn't have to be his father. But I have watched black men take care of other black men's children. And that is saying something too. So, and of course we know the thing about black women, their husband's gonna have another family down the road and he brings those children to play with her. So, I mean, we know about that dynamic, about the capabilities of black women doing that. So I really do think that another narrative that we have to reinterpret is this whole relationship thing between black men and black women and how we have bought into the divide and conquer, and which has been very, very difficult on us to maintain our community within, because that's another narrative that is not doing us a good service when we buy it, and we have bought it big time.
So I want to shift just a minute, because you had mentioned a little bit about the water, and of course the movement that we have traveled. And I wanted to ask Carol, who is the wife of Michael Platt, who this piece that you right above us. It's called River Walkers.
To get a sense of what it must have been like trying to lead people through that landscape, through the rivers, because it's all marshlands down there, and out. And then one of the rangers took that a step farther. One of the rangers regularly goes out with her dog at night and walks a certain distance, walk a certain path, make a path, and keep going. Again, for the same sense of wanting to be able to share to some measure that experience. So the series that Michael did of River Walkers, he kind of combined a couple of things. References to the major crossing from Africa to the New World waters. That's one body of water. And then when you think of settling in an area such as that we have recently come to experience, which is a bit of this the landscape part, colored basically, jungle there, was something else in this upper area as well. And then also thinking about the transition to get from wherever it is that you have been gathered, collected, captured, seized in Africa to that first point of departure. Then the departure, and then thinking again of what it was like when you're going out in a John boat or simply in the rivers, walking the rivers quietly, always at night, pretty much to make your way north to wherever it is that you ended up. So he, in a certain sense, conflates those two things. And there's some other series that we had looked at, and a piece that I wasn't able to find in time for Tim to show, that has a female figure there. It's a vertical piece. A female figure looking down, naked, and then in the water below her is another figure kind of in a fetal position. So one made it, one didn't. And I found some smaller copies of it where he just proofs, for the printing. And so I could see the development of when he first got this idea. And the first rendition of it was the slave ship, as we've all seen it, rather graphically with the layout of all of the bodies in the position. And the figure at the base of that, the one who didn't, was a very clear figure and it was clearly delineated. And the later versions before this one, which doesn't have that lower figure in it, the one didn't, had the figure still there but much more amorphous, much more in the water, as you would say. And anyway, those are differences. So I think that's it. In the upper figure, you have some sky. People always, whatever the circumstances, sooner or later you will look up and the sky will be there. So that's kind of my read on some of the discussions that Michael and I had about this particular piece.
Anton, pieces are as you walk in and you see to the right, and it's about crossing those waters and lying in the waters and escaping that place. Could you tell us a little bit about that, how you feel about your illustrations you have created in regard to the movement and how far we have come and even coming, because the issues right now, of course, are people are still trying to cross the waters to get here, and these whether it's from Africa or Haiti or wherever. Could you speak a little bit about why you did this and anything that has to do with where we're at this point?
Let's say at the time I was drawing it, my feeling was about well, to represent the Middle Passage and also represent what's happening right now in West Africa. And it takes, once you realize that it takes a lot of resilience and a lot of pretty much vision to survive all of that, to survive the just living on the water. How can you live on water? a big ocean, pretty much. There's horrible conditions like heat, no food. People pretty much losing their minds, trying to get to where they're going, or just losing themselves, pretty much, and even their own personalities. So I would think, I mean, that's happening now, right now, and I also think that's happening right here in America, in our culture. Yeah. It takes a lot of vision to surpass the shootings from officers and people who make the law, pretty much, and also set up a institution where Black people just, I would say, have their vision blocked, basically. And so that was on my mind. And also the individual faces is really important to look at. Despite the horror, despite the conditions, people are still trying to get there. You know, they're trying to, they have it in their minds and their hearts. Hey, this is where I want to be, this is where I need to be. I can't be at home anymore because of what's happening there, because of that institution. And so, you know, people want to just live peaceful lives, pretty much, simply. And they do, and people are going to do everything they can to do it.
Did you want to add to that, Roy?
Yeah, I've been listening to everything everybody's saying, and it's such a rare moment where the audience, curators of the audience, get a chance to hear the artist speak as we are speaking today. Very seldom, Tim and his associate providing this kind of venue, this kind of talk, because we don't always have a chance to say what we're saying, unfortunately. And we are really blessed because so many people feel what we create, but they have not didn't move to that next step to do it, but we did, and we were fortunate enough to be able to interpret some of our feelings that wind up sometimes being the feelings of other people. And so this 400 years, the fact that this group of artists, this group of work is in this room at this particular time is symbolic of our being here, our continuing to be here, and then passing this along, because a lot of people up here work with young people. A lot of us people up here work with media. And so we're doing our job. That's what we're doing. This is part of our job, our mission. And so this is the other part of the art that you see on the wall, is our voices speaking about it, our actually going into it and sharing some of the emotions that go on behind it. And so we are fortunate being able to do this. You are fortunate being able to be here and share this. And so the idea is that the dialogue hopefully won't stop, so that sometimes artists is mystified by some big European concept of what artist is. It's really, everybody's an artist one way or another.
Did you have another question?
Yeah, so as we know, we continue to evolve and the landscape around us is changing. I am not a native DC, but I've been coming here, I'm not a native Washingtonian, I mean, I've been coming here though from a child, visiting, and I've noticed so much changing, so much of the, some cultural institutions and different things, they look different, neighborhoods look different, so I just wanted to hear, as an artist, what are you doing to combat what's happening around you in DC? It goes for, all right, you can be in other areas, if you live in another place, and you see parts of your culture being taken away in subtle ways, what are you doing? How do you combat that?
On that. You know, I've talked with a number of artists here, you know, in passing about this, but it's not unique. It's not new. You make the place the murder capital. It becomes something scary. Developers, or other groups come in and they roll it at the shrimp boat. Like, you know, there's a condo there, or there's. Wait a minute. Wait, what do you mean? So you know, from week to week, and you see the entire landscape that was your childhood change. And I don't think it's any different from somebody coming from the continent. When you see the whole landscape change. So I think as a Washingtonian, that's where we pick up our machetes. Whether they be brushes, whether they be clay, whether they be textile, whether they be collage, whether it be poetry. We got to pick up our machetes and chop away. And also tenderly, with those same hands, nestle our youth and preserve our culture in that same way and educate people. You know, this didn't always used to be here. This used to be a school. This was the first school that black people were allowed to go to in Washington, D.C. My studio used to be a milk factory. Did you know people used to deliver milk? You know, so, you know, we got to use this as a teaching moment, which is an ongoing teaching moment. Because the landscape is always going to change, but the game isn't going to change. The game has never changed. It has never changed. When I think about ancient Kemet, and I think about how we were fed it, and when all the books, and you think about all the philosophers that we learned about in school that were accredited with thousands of books, after Alexander came back from the libraries with bags, here, read this, it's yours now. So it's no different. The fight's the same, the struggle's the same, and African art is functional art. It's not just a face on a spoon, it's a spoon. It's got beautiful work. It's a spoon you can eat with. It's not supposed to be behind glass. It's functional. So I think as Washingtonians or people in this area or any urban area that sees change, any country that sees change, any continent that sees change, neighborhood that sees change, it's our duty because we can talk freely even when we're being persecuted as artists. If something happened to me tomorrow, my work is still here.
Yeah.
My work is still here. You know, murals can get covered up, but to me, being able to work in bronze has been like the biggest transformation for me as an artist. If you told me 5 years ago I'd be putting something up in bronze, I'd have laughed you out the room. But to know that when my children go there and my grandchildren go there, they can say, you know, my dad did this, and it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. You know, so I think, you know, we have a duty to preserve, we have a duty to educate and not just be upset, but also convey why we are upset. It's not just, you know, like you can be positively angry. We've been taught to quell all this. Just like hip hop, we were growing up, we had X-Clan on the radio, we had you know, self-destruction and all these messages that were coming out to us through the music. Now all I hear is cats that can't even talk versus let's not even talk about the message. But you know, we got a duty, and everybody here doesn't just do what you see on the wall. Folks in here are parents, folks in here are scholars, folks in here are musicians, folks in here are therapists and healers, spiritual guides. You don't know the breadth of what somebody is in this room just because you're looking at one of their pieces. You don't know what else they do.
Well, I guess you can safely say that we have to do everything. We have to continue to educate and continue to move forward on as artists, as enlightening life.
Can I build on what?
Yeah, and then Preston, you wanted to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I know, okay, great. I wanted to add to what Brother was saying just now, is that this is a conversation that I have many times with a lot of creative professionals that I know. And I'm from the DC area originally, but I've spent the last 10 years based in New York, where the same things are happening. This, you know, Harlem does not look the same as it did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and you know, or when my grandmother grew up there. And she's telling me that, in my youth, we would get dressed up on Sundays and walk down on 25th Street and down on 25th Street. Now it's just like a bunch of junkies out there. And it's just like the disintegration of the community is just so heartbreaking to see, right? And then this whole other group of people come in and build it up and call it an up and coming area, and you know, the property values, just everything just changes, and the people who have been paying taxes and living there and building a community there get pushed out. And so the argument like sometimes ends up being like, yeah, it's changing, but it's better. Do you really want those junkies on the street? Do you really want this and that? I'm like, yeah, it's better, but for who? But for who? If it makes the community better, why can't the people who have been living here all that time benefit from it? You know? And so it's like, you know, we have to, like you would think, it's a duty for all of us to preserve our history, you know, teach our youth, you know, and celebrate our culture unapologetically. And I think that now that we have like things like social media and the internet, we have totally different platforms to galvanize and to communicate and to organize in ways that we haven't experienced yet. So now we're not in a position where it's like, oh, we need a leader. It's like, we just need to all coordinate. That's it. You know what I'm saying? If we can do it for a concert, or we can do it for, you know, all these other things, these made up holidays they put, you know, oh, it's National Coffee Day, and everybody in the world is supposed to drink coffee. It's like, if we can do that, why can't we organize to build our communities up, or build a resistance, or do this or that? And I think that, you know, I think it's something that we can see in our lifetime. It's just like this kind of change in the dynamic of how we think of our own power and the things that we push in and see the results and enjoy the results. So it's like you were saying, a lot of people, like people are doing different things. How am I doing it? I enjoy teaching seniors. I love teaching the seniors of our community. I feel like they are forgotten a lot of times and abandoned, and they have so much they want to do things, and they want to be cared for, and they want to tell their stories, and all these other things. They want to still feel involved. And so my job is to bring art and art therapy to that community, you know, and make it a service, do it in a way that it's a service they can take advantage of without having to pay for anything, you know. And then I work it all out. I still get paid. But, you know, the community can benefit from what I have to offer. And I also, I mentor other artists. You know, if an artist comes to me and they're like, oh, how'd you do this, how'd you do that? You know, I will always answer questions. I can't do it right away all the time, but I will always pay artwork to the community that wants to see it. And through that, we have promoted literacy through art and all of that kind of thing.
Okay, going back to the gentrification thing, my biggest pleasure of my fight back for gentrification is seeing my joints on the wall. You know, like I'm getting a lot of stuff on 8th Street, you know, and like a gentrifying area, like the Apollo building on 8th Street, $300 million price. The only brothers in there, and they say Apollo, they folks have appropriated the name Apollo. And they've got all of this stuff, and I put Jordan like Duke Ellington and all of them, and they're like, why you put this in there? I'm like, really? I said, I'll tell you what, read, check it out. The other ones, you know, I mean, over and over, you know, the University of Georgia. My great-grandfather got lynched in North Florida. There's a painting I do that's like one of my recurrent figures, the brother with the big crazy hat, you know, the big hat, they built a nation. Somebody said that too. That did back in the 90s. That brother is in University of Georgia, permanent collection, and that's where he got lynched, in northern Florida / southern Georgia. He gets, that's almost like his last laugh, you know, but I would say this, you know, we're educating these people to make them deal with our imagery and our face, you know, I mean, you know, and who we are, our reality, whether it's abstract art. Every time I go through Tacoma and see Sam's mural, mosaic, I'm like, there it is, that's what I'm talking about. You know, every work, you just see our work, all of these conversations we're having in the real, in the 2 or 3 dimensional, and they have to deal with it. I think that is a thing you talk about, empowering the community. People seeing themselves, seeing what they look like. Every time it goes on and on, but that to me is the most beautiful part of the fight back against gentrification. And what you're talking about, while the service is there, you talk to the developers, they're like, well, it's better now. You know, you've got the cops on the Segways, you know, riding through the alley on 8th Street. Well, I said, but they weren't there when my grandmama was living there, you know, and they were shooting and they, you know, harassment, you know, and doing it. And so, like I say, again, I'm a dead horse, but I'm just proud to be up here with all of y'all. You know, it's a beautiful room.
So do you guys have some questions for this wonderful panel of artists? I want to give an opportunity for our interview to ask questions or have a comment.
And I'm an artist advocate, but a lot of people say I am an artist, but I represent an iconic figure that passed a year ago, who was my husband of 46 years, and we started an institution in 1978.
Please say his name.
Ernest Marshall Palmer. And it was the Palmer Gallery, and it grew out of our experience of going to the motherland. I was sent as an educational ambassador, and it turned both of our heads around in terms of who we really were. If you don't know your history, I mean, your authentic history, I'm not talking about, you know, the history that has been given us through the institutions, then you're lost. And that's the reason why we see what's happening with our young people. They're lost. They're lost. So it's our responsibility. We can't depend on anybody else, but it's our responsibility to roll up our sleeves, use whatever resources, collaborate, do whatever to make sure that they get this authentic history. Because once they get it and they embrace it, it's no return. I know for my husband and I, it was no return, even though even our families reject us to this day. They're inside one box, we're not in that box. But it's okay. I'm okay with that. So I just want to, I think the audience needs to give you all an applause. And I'm just so happy, and we do this all the time though. We have to know, we know that the artists are part of the social change. And they're the fighters, they're soldiers, but you have other people who step in, like someone said, you know, you have people from all you know, occupations, and you know, all of us are educators. We have to be in order to save our history and our culture. And I honestly, I'm enjoying this. I'm bringing one of my emerging artists, who's a musician and a writer, and she's been coming to a lot of these events that we invited to, so I'm just happy to have the connection. And I'm reaching out and coming over to DC more and more. I'm inviting you all to Baltimore. I live in the Art and Cultural District of Baltimore City and lived in my property for over 30 years. They call me the grandma of that community. It is going through gentrification, but I'm constantly throwing in their face. But this, you need to know who we are. You need to know who we are, because without the African presence, you wouldn't even exist. So I could say more, but anyway, thank you.
Do you have a question or comment there?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you all the artists, or any one of you in general that want to speak about this, do you feel that the community overall, whether they're gentrifiers or whether they're indigenous Washingtonians, do you feel that they overall, the large amount of the community embraces the art that you do? And then the other question I have was for this brother, he's from Germany, right? Do you find that the African community there, or artists, are doing something with the 400, and if so, what are they doing right now with the theme?
Well, I think the opportunity is not there, as far as I can tell. There's something called the Berlin Biennale, and I would say the last event, it was about Africans and African art, things like that, but it took like over 10 years before they got there. So it's slowly happening, but you know, not as fast as I would like to see it.
Okay. And what are you? What country are you from? Are you
I'm from
okay.
I'm from the United States. I'm from Tampa, Florida, and I moved to Berlin in 2002.
Okay.
Well, I would like to say something towards that, or just a thought that came to me is that when I first started, like really trying to be a full-time artist and make a living at it, I had a portfolio full of Black faces, Black people, because that's what I like to draw. It was my experience. I don't know, it's what I like. And I was told many, many times to, you know, if you're gonna work in a commercial field, you have to pull back on all this Blackness, you know, put some white people in there so they'll be less
More acceptable.
yeah, it won't be so offensive or scary. And I was like, that's bogus. Like, I'm not doing that, you know.
Is that a Black person who said that to you?
Black people, white people, old people, young people, everybody was telling me this is not the move. You know, you gotta include white people or you'll never get work this way. And so I took that on as a challenge, that I can get corporate work doing exactly what I do. And anytime I have landed a corporate gig, guess what? Their ads gonna have Black people in it, and they're gonna love it, and you know, it's gonna be all right. Nobody is gonna like freak out or die or anything crazy like that. Like you have to show them that these things are perfectly fine and acceptable, you know, and that we are part of who they're trying to target. So, you know, we have money to spend, we buy computers and we buy these things, you know, so it makes sense that Black people and all kinds of people are represented in advertising and things. So I have made it a point all the time, I'm in the middle of that right now. If you ask me to paint anything, it is going to be a Black person. And it will. That's just what it's going to be. If it's a jewelry ad, it's going to be a brown hand hold, you know what I mean, with a ring on it. That's what it's going to be. And you know, and if it's not for you, it's just not for you. I understand my art's not for everybody. It's not meant to be. And no one's art is for every single person. And everyone's got their little niche or whatever. And so my thing has been to kind of just dispel this myth that Blackness is scary, and that it's actually an asset to include this stuff in your advertising because it shows that you care. And so I am just like all about doing my work, just including Blackness in a very unapologetic way.
Thank you.
If everybody in this room dropped $10 every week into something, add that up. And there are about 75 or 100 people in here, $10 a week, that's 100, what is that, $700 a week times 4 is $28,000 a month. And that would support a gallery, an intern, an assistant, and regular shows, and catalogs for shows like this. That we want it to travel, but this show needs a curatorial statement by Tim, and ideas, a concept statement by Alana, and it needs to be in a book. And so when we talk about the future, some of that is the past, and it kind of reminds me, I understand, I've never seen it, but at the end of Fiddler on the Roof, the guy asked him, where are you going? He says, Cleveland, I'm going here. He says, oh, because he's family. He says, no, because he's a Jew. And what that translates is to no, because they're a Black person. And no, we need to bank that money in industrial bank. And we need to we bought into the assimilation and I wasn't here in DC, but I've been told stories that there used to be like this club where this restaurant where Thurgood Marshall and all of them used to go to, and they'd sit there and strategize, and it was like the coolest thing since sliced bread. And I understand the owner of that told them, look, you guys are going for this, I'm gonna be out of business in a year once this passes. And it was the truth. So that U Street and H Street and all these economic, Black Broadway that employed people, that clothed people, that mentored kids into jobs and all of that kind of thing is gone. And we have to, I believe, I'd be willing to drop $10 a week and get Mother Teresa to say you'll die and go to hell if you misspend it. I'd be willing to do that, and
Well, that subject is definitely another conversation for economic
okay, I'll
power.
apply it.
No, but I mean, seriously, it is, that's one that we can have like hours on. Economic power is what we are talking about, like you just said, the black banks. We do need to put money into our black banks. We need to put money into the businesses that are here, the restaurants. Find those individuals and let's support them. It is a thing that we've been talking about. This is about the 400 where we can actually make a difference.
Yes.
Today to now. Yes.
I've built and lost businesses because of a lack of support from
Yes.
our community.
Yes.
So,
I'd like to congratulate Tim and Alana for putting together such a wonderful show. The question I would like to ask both of you is, how did you go about selecting the work and also the artists that are represented here? Because I am in awe of how they talk about that experience at 1619 to 2019. It is an amazing body of work, but and just to think of, just to see how they thought about their work and how they relate to the current situation that we're living in. How did you go about choosing these artists? And
Well, many of these are my friends. We are fellow artists, and
I'm just impressed.
we have connected years ago. I mean, this is a spiritual show. It is a continual show, absolutely. But we did have a call out to artists. We invited artists, and we had more than actually what the space that would allow, definitely. And it was a very difficult task. Would you agree to actually narrow it down? Even some of the art that was coming in, I mean, each artist could have had 3, 4 pieces in by themselves, which is great. And that's that was the task. But we kind of had some kind of guidelines, not really guidelines, but we wanted to actually, have the focus be on their personal journey in some regard to how, every phase. Frank Smith, who is not here, who's that this piece over here, it has to do with music and jazz and that history of our culture with jazz and those kind of things. So it's a little bit of a variety of pieces. Albert's went back in the past and did some other things with his work. Warren Walton about protest. So our goal was to try to cover so many areas, which wasn't an easy task, and also try to have an illustrator, a photographer, a printmaker, a painter, collage, and Anne's work, which is assemblages and sculpture. Would you want to add to that, Alana? Anything else? But it's just one of those. And thank you, though. Thank you for that.
Yes, I'd say we were also looking for just that diversity within the diaspora and look at the work that spoke to the themes of the show. We got artists from so many places. Canada, I know it was hard because we had to look through so many really great pieces, but if they didn't add to the narrative of what specifically we were looking for, we had to pass it up. So it was difficult, but there was a synergy with a lot of these artists that are here, as you can see, and they just fit.
so would you be interested in taking the show somewhere else, like to another city?
Absolutely. That's our goal. This is kind of the beginning of this this journey, and to hopefully expand it, and also, as we speak, have proposals in for that to travel to other places. And yeah, the response has been very good, so it seems like it has to go.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's, Ramadi,
So as I was sitting here thinking about the questions that I would ask, actually I really have two questions, but what I'd like to do is just kind of throw out. So we've been talking about, this 400-year journey. And I often think about, our history really is kind of a map of where we come from and where we've been and how we got to where we are. But I'm always looking ahead to the future. And so I know as artists that you're all going through a process of evolution as artists in your work from where you were as an artist when you started. But there's a future that's coming for each of you. And where do you see your artwork going as you move into the future? Maybe you're going through a transitional period right now. Maybe the work that's here is reflective of where you were 10 years ago, but maybe you're actually evolving to a new place now. So my real question is, what's next for you as an artist? But the other question I have is one that's more, ultimate, that we're all leaving some type of legacy. And so in the next 400 years, if someone were to look back in history and there was a statement written about you as an artist, what would be a sentence that you might like to have written about you that said, he did this or she did that or his work spoke to, what's that future for you as an artist?
Go ahead, Wes.
So at least to start with the first portion, the direction of the work, because I've been thinking about this recently, and there was an intentional shift at one point, moving from talking about, struggle almost a bit from a victim standpoint to turning that and really beginning to focus on our beauty and our strengths. And even now, my most recent body of work is really now thinking even, solution oriented. Because oftentimes we're talking about, we discuss issues, and so my current show is it deals with reparations, but I'm talking about it from an internal point of view, what we can give ourselves, what we now owe ourselves. And similarly to what Terrence had mentioned in the book from Dr. Joy DeGroot, she's talking about, drawing those linkages back and thinking about what we now have the freedom to do, whether in what we owe ourselves that freedom to do. And the work we can do on ourselves to push forward. And so that is, I think, primarily what I've been focusing on in terms of on a communal level, like whether it's building a Black economy, whether it's making therapy a more normalized thing in our community, just healing all around and really helping us trying to think of creative ways to discuss that and bring it forward, so that it becomes, so again, pushing the conversation to normalize many of these things. Whether it's Black men kind of being able to shed this, what I always say, warrior mode, but in a, not in a defensive way, but almost in a survival way, where we never turn it off. And so now, as I've become a father and realizing like how I'm raising my son or how I'm raising my daughter, like my heart has been enjoying a more fuller range of emotion, I should say, and dealing with that, internally, but also recognizing how I'm, giving my heart to my children and my wife and such. And so just kind of helping and thinking about that on a wider scale. And we talk about cycles and like what our children are and youth are going through, both our young men, our young women, and so that's just one of the, I guess, kind of solution oriented things I'm thinking about. But yeah, that's what. Great.
Your thought for me raises a couple of things in terms of looking at how we got through and what we used to get through. Like that old church song that sometimes I sit back and wonder how I got over. And one of the things that's always intrigued me about how we got over, two things. One, the hidden narrative, the African American community. There's a hidden narrative, there's a hidden story that used to be palpable and which guided us, and which was a part of who we defined ourselves as. And that hidden narrative, people are going to be referencing their work, but my work definitely speaks to, addresses a hidden narrative. That there are things that we know that other people don't know, and there are things that some of us know that other people don't know. And that all of that is functional, so that all of the work is about being used and incorporated in the community. That's one thing. That hidden narrative in our subtext, I think, has been eroded some. And the other thing I think that's been eroded some is the first time Wesley mentioned the money word. and the economics of it. And I don't care what anybody says about the black church, that and the street gangs. They're the only two functioning economic entities that have control over their own resources on a regular basis, the gangs and the church.
There's a few banks.
And a few banks. Okay, in DC, yeah. On behalf of the artists for Tim and Alana, could you guys stand, please? Stand. Yes. We want to